the state of Maharashtra, schools have reopened for all classes across the state, including that in Mumbai. This has come after the state government gave its nod to reopen schools across the state and empowered the local administrations to take a final call depending on COVID situation in their respective districts. However, State Minister Aaditya Thackeray has denied the obligation on part of the students to attend these schools physically, and he said that sending a child to school depends on the parents or the ward's wish. So the schools, in fact, in the state of Maharashtra have opened up. In fact, it is totally on the behest of the district administration and the going down of the COVID cases that, in fact, the state government has decided that the schools, in fact, should physically open up. The children do seem excited because 2 years of back and forth, they have not been able to physically go to schools. Now, finally, they are back to school and hence happy. We'd have to really wait and watch how this entire process is really put forth on ground so that maximum security for kids are really ensured as far as the school campuses are concerned.
एक सही कदम है कि पेरेंट्स शुड फील कॉन्फिडेंट टू सेंड चिल्ड्रन टू स्कूल्स, लेकिन ये स्कूल एक सेफ एनवायरनमेंट है और स्कूल भेजना जरूरी है, स्कूल में बच्चों का आना जरूरी है। इसके सही कम्युनिकेशन भी इम्पॉर्टेंट है। और क्यों ये इम्पॉर्टेंट है और स्कूल्स में क्या क्या प्रिकॉशन लिए गए हैं। फैक्ट ये है कि महीनों से हर राज्य में हर स्कूल इसके तैयारी में जुटे हुए हैं। अभी जो आपने रिपोर्ट दिखाया, फील्ड रिपोर्ट, वो भी यही दर्शा रहे हैं कि काफ़ी अच्छी तैयारी है, काफ़ी मजबूत तैयारी है। और फैक्ट तो ये है कि स्कूल से कभी कोई मेजर आउटब्रेक नहीं शुरू हुआ है। स्कूल्स में तब केसेस शुरू हुआ है जब कम्युनिटी में ट्रांसमिशन हाई है। उस दौरान ही स्कूल में बच्चों में केसेस पाए गए। स्कूल से कभी नहीं शुरू हुआ है आउटब्रेक्स। इसलिए स्कूल सेटिंग्स काफ़ी सेफ है, लेकिन ये ज़रूर है कि स्कूल में कई जो प्रिकॉशंस हैं वो पालन करना चाहिए, वो इम्पोर्टेंट है।
I'm also now joined on the broadcast by Dr. Sanjeev Bagai, head of Nephron Clinics. Dr. Bagai, thank you so much for joining me. Now, this is an important step there by the Maharashtra government, opening of schools. Do we consider this as a new normal? And would this be a template now set for the country? Because like we have been talking about, COVID really is here to stay.
Good morning. So schools reopening will have to happen at some point of time, but the major risks in opening the schools at the present moment are as follows. Most of the children below the age
we seem to have lost that link with Dr. Bagai. We'll try and reconnect with him, but this is a major story that we are tracking as children now are back to their school campuses. The Maharashtra government, in fact, is the front runner. Remember, this was the worst hit state that, in fact, reported the highest number of COVID cases. And now that the cases are under control, the government has decided to open schools for children. Dr. Bagai, in fact, we'll try and reconnect with him. But this is the story. You can see the visuals on your screens. Our reporters from on ground are bringing to us these visuals as students, in fact, have gotten back to the campuses. These are visuals from Mumbai and the entire state of Maharashtra, which has, in fact, decided in the wake of the reduced number of COVID cases that students should, in fact, physically be attending classes now. But, however, this is not really mandatory. We will, in fact, try and get Dr. Bagai back. Meanwhile, my colleague Disha Shah has filed this report from on. Let's take a look at that.
Private schools had not really opened up, especially in December when the government had allowed, the schools to reopen. The private schools said that they'll take some more time and they will think about it only post the winter break. So especially for the private schools and the students who really study here, it is definitely a new year and new experience, and especially coming back to the school corridors like you can see, good old days, because all of these students have studied for the last 2 years only online, and now on the first day coming back to the offline classes, coming back to the benches, coming back to the classrooms, and studying between teachers, studying between friends is something which is very excitement sort of a level for them. And I'll just show you that what the first day looks like, especially at RN Podar school here. If I can ask my video journalist George just to show you around, with this, of course, a new COVID era, keeping in mind all the COVID protocols. As you can see that the social distancing is an important factor. So only one student per bench, and that too alternate benches, is what we can see. What is better for you? Online was better because that was definitely at your comfort zone as well. But right now, coming to your physical classes, what do you prefer? And what sort of COVID protocols you are aware that you need to keep in mind when you're coming to the school?
I mean, COVID-wise, we have to keep our sanitizer in our bag all time. Masks is a compulsory, and alternate benches. Even if somebody sits here, we have to be shifted back to alternate benches. And offline school-wise is just better because it's easier to ask teacher the doubts, look at the board, and not distracted at home.
I'm now joined on the broadcast by Dr. Sameer Dalwai, a pediatrician. Dr. Dalwai, thank you so much for joining me on the broadcast, and a very good morning. Now, I'd ask you the same question that I was asking Dr. Bagai. Do you see this as a template being set for the rest of the country? And is it really the right time to open schools for children?
Yeah, good morning, and thanks for having me on the show. I think we must bust the myth that schools reopening and schools running have any more to do with COVID. Sure enough, 2 years back, when we didn't know anything about COVID and the entire country was in lockdown, schools did shut down. We kept thinking that children could be either vectors and could spread the disease to older people, especially grandparents, or they could get infected themselves and there would be a very high mortality. That has been totally shown to be wrong by science today. Children in all the three waves have very fortunately had very, very mild symptoms of the disease and hardly any mortality. So we must understand that every child will get infected. Anybody who is breathing will get a viral infection if he is not immune to it. So infection cannot be stopped unless you wear a mask. But we have to understand that children do not get severe or even moderate disease. So the schools must reopen. That's extremely important. The other point that I would also like to perhaps bust the myth is that children are extremely eager to get back to school. Perhaps a year back, this narrative was right. Today, the reality is different. Now, children are actually, unfortunately, got used to staying at home in the comfort of their house, lying down on their bed and attending online classes, being spoon-fed, if I may say so, at home, having no responsibility or discipline. The younger children who are 5-6 years old have never been to a school. So even you're going to get separation anxiety even at the age of 5-6 years. What is very important, and hence my suggestion is, all of us as civil society, as doctors, as teachers, must encourage parents and children in every possible way to return to schools so that schools are opened and continue to be open. The academics can wait. First, let it make it a place of happiness and joy for children to come back. Let them start coming back to a habit of waking up in the morning, getting ready, doing their daily chores, leaving for the school, reaching the school, adjusting with the other children, with the teachers, and then gradually let's move on to the curriculum and to examinations and marks. But at no cost must school continue to be closed now. Thank you.
Absolutely. Dr. Dalwai, while you say that, in fact, we saw a lot of happy faces right from early in the morning, especially from Mumbai, where little children, in fact, were very, very kicked about going back to school. This is not a common sight that we could have actually spoken, 2 years before this pandemic. But this pandemic has actually shown us newer ways actually to adjust, the new normal that we've been talking about. So what are the precautions that you suggest the schools should actually go ahead, agree upon? We are already seeing, a staggered approach. Not all classes are being conducted at the same time. Junior classes are probably in the first half of the day and the second half is reserved for the senior classes. What else can the school administration really do?
Let me clarify my earlier point. I'm not saying all children are unhappy, but I'm saying don't ignore those who might be unhappy. There will be a substantial number who may not be happy, who may be worried, who may be scared, who may be anxious to go back. We need to support them as well. Coming back to the guidelines, the Maharashtra Pediatric
Yes.
Task Force, has, along with the government of Department of Ministry of Education, Maharashtra has already put up these guidelines, and the schools are already aware of these guidelines for the last 1 year. And as you can see in the visuals that you are showing, they're already being followed. So basically, the same format: masking, social distancing, hygiene, and avoiding crowding. But if you have to just extrapolate this into school. So whether we call children on alternate day and alternate day, it's a online versus offline, all this is fine. Let the schools practice this, but it's very important that parents support the school and don't let it fall only on the head of the school. This is an era where parent teacher association has to be the strongest, and we will see this emerging in the next few months. Parents will have to be more closely associated with schools, but not to pick holes only, also to support the schools. There may be some schools who may not be able to afford all the sanitization and stuff like that, which we must make sure that they are able to get that.
Right. Dr. Dalwai, very important points that you were mentioning. I'd like to bring our viewers' attention to especially the junior kids, because classes for the kids who are in the nursery have also started. Now, as far as masking is concerned, it's very difficult to contain these little kids to constantly be masked. You know, is it a major problem with children who have a good immunity? If they are not masked, let's say while playing, they can be taken care of?
Yeah, absolutely. But you know, children are actually more disciplined than even adults. Once you tell them to wear a mask, and once they wear a mask, they'll make the adults remind the adults that
Yes.
mommy or daddy, you're not wearing a mask, or teacher, you're not wearing a mask. Having said that, we must understand the difference between infection and disease. This is a viral infection, this is a novel new infection. Either you've got the infection and developed immunity, or you've been vaccinated and developed immunity. If you haven't either, there absolutely is a likelihood that you will get the infection. What we need to tell the parents is the infection in children does not lead to severe disease. It's just like any other flu, जिसको हम सर्दी खांसी कहते हैं, which happens seasonally, and all of us are used to it. Every child gets a cough and cold episode at least 4 or 5 times in a year in the first 3 or 4 years of life, especially when they start going to schools. Today, we have to treat COVID in children similar to that. If there is a cough and cold and your child has any symptoms, the most important thing is keep the child at home for the next few days. Consult your doctor, and until the doctor tells you to go back, keep the child at home. But if the child is asymptomatic, by all means, he should be keeping going. He should keep going to school, and consult your pediatrician. The Indian Academy of Pediatrics has put out guidelines for school reopening. You mentioned about the other states. It actually doesn't go from state to state. It goes from taluka to taluka, if not district to district. The local positivity rate, the local rate of infection actually was to determine this earlier. But like I'm saying now, these rates are more concerned with amount of oxygen available and hospitalization needed and oxygen needed. When we say that children do not need any of these measures because they do not get severe illness, it doesn't even depend on that. So I think all across the country, we must make a bold step following strictly COVID protocols and guidelines laid down by the government for the schools. Schools should reopen. Some children, most children, I'm sure, will be happy to go back. Those who are not, those who are anxious, don't push them, or don't be too dominating. Be very gentle with them and get them back to school. Support them. There will be a lot of anxiety. Keep allaying their fears, and that's why the first few days, just have songs, just at least for the younger children. Just have some antakshari or some games, or let them share their experiences. Let them talk. Let them say what they feel about the pandemic, what they've seen at home. Children love to talk. Let them talk and share with each other. That's the best way to get them to allay their anxiety.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Sameer Dalwai, for joining me on the broadcast. Very important discussion there with Dr. Dalwai. The students, in fact, are kicked. Those who are still unsure, because remember, not all children are vaccinated in the country yet. They, in fact, have the choice to continue with the online classes from their houses. Meanwhile, offline classes have begun as far as the state of Maharashtra is concerned. We'd have to wait and watch when the rest of the country decides to open its schools to its children.